Hello YouTube, get excited. One of the best characters in Final Fantasy X, Auron, is coming back and he's becoming a tank along with Boss Rush, which we haven't gotten in a bit, and this is the second to last one Boss Rush we get until JP, so enjoy it, although there's some new tweaks now that we're in the Lufenia Plus era. Anyway, this is my pull plan series where I break down information quickly and go over my thoughts and plans on upcoming characters and events. I play both JP and Global consistently, and I use my knowledge, research, and experience to help others. My goal is to help everyone make informed decisions based on their own roster. There's too many variables to consider for straight up general advice, but I like to try and explain the nuance to help people arrive at their own conclusions. I throw my plans in the mix as well to put some skin in the game and potentially give you all ideas on how to think. I want to hear your plans too, so be sure to leave a comment in the comment section, obviously where else would they go, with your polls and planned teams for the event. I do read all the comments, so don't hesitate to hit me up with questions. Also, while you're here, like the video, subscribe, helps me out tons. You can also become a channel member, 99 cents, dollar, whatever. Emotes, and make sure I always reply to your comments. I just go through every day and check them. Lastly, be sure to check out the Ranting Hour, my weekly stream where me and others talk about the city and other stuff. Last one, it got pretty insane with the idiot of the century, so if you want to check that out, it was pretty fun doing that. We talked about some good stuff, but yeah, go ahead and check that out. I do believe that that's the content I enjoy making most, and I think it's my most entertaining content as well. Let's talk Auron, shall we? First of all, his kit now with his LD makes him into a counter cover tank. He was previously a debuffer, mainly towards melee, and he had some iBrave and mbrave stuff as well, but they largely ignored that now in favor of amping his ability as a counter tank. He's also a debuffer. He's supposed to be paired with melee units, although he can work with others, but melee units on the team is really where he shines. Apparently people love my JP reaction to that video, so go check that out too if you want to see how I reacted at the time, seeing as he became a cover tank. Anywho, he did not get a rework, and this was a point of concern for some people. They're like, what? His base kit is trash. How is he going to be good? And it turns out his LD is so loaded that it makes up for lack of a rework, which is awesome. I'm going to be talking assuming his LD board is maxed, but his actual attack is a double AoE Brave plus HP that ignores defense. He drops a new debuff that makes the enemy do 30% less Brave and HP damage to the party, so you're not taking as much damage. They take 20% more HP damage, and any melee Brave attacks are buffed by 30%. He also drops the melee weak debuff, so if you're bringing melee alongside Auron in the party, you're getting a total of, I think it's 80% damage up just because you're hitting weakness. Don't quote me on the numbers, it's just a giant melee buff. The new buff that Auron gets from his LD gives him HP regen, it makes him take less Brave damage, gives him more overflow, and it gives him last stand as well. Additionally, when he's attacking a debuff target, which should be all the time, he gets a massive damage boost, and after he does an HP attack, he gets 20% refund. Think of how Bartz gets refunded after he HP attacks, Auron is the same way. This buff also makes him counter if he takes damage. When he uses LD, he also gives a cover buff to the party. The party takes less Brave damage, and it gives him HP regen as well. The actual counter is an ignore defense attack that hits AoE, and it heals Auron afterwards based on the amount of HP damage he's dealt. He also puts his LD debuff back up, so you got pretty much infinite uptime on this. His Heimer Plus is Selfish debuff that leans in the HP split. It's actually pretty good for him with enough overflows and HP damage modifiers. He can actually hit pretty high on his counters, just his skills won't be doing that much. His calls are also actually decent. His base call only drops the melee imperil, and the LD call drops the melee imperil in a modified version of his LD debuff. Unfortunately, they don't have the 20% HP damage up in their pocket. The HP damage up is nerfed to 5%, and the melee Brave damage up is reduced to 20%. The defensive properties of the debuff are still there, so that's solid. So it's a decent melee buff because it's got the 2 debuffs on it. If you're trying to take less Brave and HP damage, you got it there as well, but you're not going to be dealing as much HP damage if you use him as an LD call. That was a lot, so let's break it down. Auron's strengths are now his insane defensive capabilities. The party is taking less damage overall, Brave and HP, when he's in the party, assuming his debuff is up, which it always should be. HP regen to keep you alive, HP damage reduction as a debuff on the boss, so you're taking less damage. He'll cover single target attacks and heal himself back up, so he's self-sufficient in that regard. You don't need to worry about him staying alive unless he takes some really nuclear stuff, but even then he's got last stand. His counters ignore defense, so if you're facing some high defense boss and they got nasty attacks, Auron will cut that down fairly easily. Ignore defense is a relevant stat in Lufenia Plus again, and Auron cutting through that is very handy. His debuffs are good. They're really good for him because it skyrockets his damage because he does all melee and he loves the HP damage up. Assuming all his buffs and debuffs are active, Auron has a functional 40% HP damage up when he attacks, a lot of Brave damage up. It's a lot, I don't feel like calculating it, but it is significant. And if you pair him with other melee units, they get to eat off of that as well. iBrave and mbrave down are decent, nice to have. They can affect bosses at certain times, but really the big ones are melee resist down and his counter debuff. And even if he's not in the party, you can fall back on him as an LD call to potentially boost your melee Brave damage. His weaknesses are that his on-turn damage is still really bad, so you're not gonna do a no boss turn run if you're bringing a counter tank. That's counterproductive. He is less effective if you're not bringing melee units alongside him. This is not a downside per se, but he's not going to be as good. You're not going to be building a team to its full capacity, but this is a nitpick at best. The melee resist down, M Brave down, and I Brave down are all unframed, which can clash with some generic debuffs or potentially fall off. And his modifiers are all percent based, so if you don't have a good attack base behind it, if you're not debuffing their defense enough, all the brave damage up that he provides to the party potentially won't be as good. He's also got no burst heal, so if you're only relying on his HP regen, which is 10%, which is on the lower side, and you really need to heal at the last second, it's either you got to do it through a call, a summon, or another party member, or you might get killed. For potential teams with Auron, you want to probably avoid bringing other debuffers so you don't push his stuff off. Melee attackers and melee supports would be good alongside him to buff the attack, since he doesn't buff that for anybody but himself. Ideally, you'd bring him alongside other melee units, but again, this is not a hard requirement, just a nice to have, because you want to take full advantage of that frame debuff. He pairs really nicely with Jekt, who's coming up soon, as he should. Tidus does a lot of melee. Core plus Auron sounds hilarious, actually. Maybe throw him in as a call alongside Garland if you're trying to delay people. Maybe Sync alongside Auron. She delays herself and then Auron covers her. This dude's really good and he's really flexible. Maybe with a Pain call and some other, maybe Vincent, you could do some I Brave and M Brave shenanigans. There's a lot of possibilities. As for useful fights, aside from the upcoming boss rush in which he's featured, in which he should be good, Divine Shiva is a really good fight for Auron. They are always attacking and he is always countering, and you want to hit hard on that fight and quickly. Kadaj lost chapters just because they're tanky and you want them to take damage if they hit you, assuming you're not no-turning them. Shadow's raid event has an ignore defense orb, which Auron can take in the off turn because his counter ignores defense. In Transcendent 6, I hate talking about solos, but this is relevant for people with, I think it's with the Ferris RF, he can solo the left Crucible. He's also really good on the middle fight just for reapplying debuffs on the off turn, because they have the final bosses, the final wave has a nasty debuff condition. Past that, I don't think there's anything in particular he shines in, maybe Divine Ifrit, but he's really just a good unit overall. On my JP account, I actually only used him in the boss rush and then Transcendent 6, although I could have used him more, but I preferred to use Zac on occasion. But I know people who ran him into the ground. The event is Boss Rush, but now there is a very hard plus mode in Boss Rush, in which the turn requirement is lowered from 50 to 30. You still have to bring 3 teams and there are 3 waves. However, the actual fights are regular Lufenia reductions, and not as harsh reductions as Lufenia Plus. So the first wave is the new boss, these whales. The orb, which comes on after 80%, is that you either need to deal weak melee damage or you need to reduce brave damage via an effect or a buff, and this goes up +2 per every target hit. So if they do an AoE attack and all the target is protected by something, say Hope's protect buff, it'll be +6. This wave is obviously made for Auron, but there's so many other options. Beatrix, Hope, Party or Call, Warrior Light, Party or Call, Guy, I guess, Bosch, Galuf, Zac, although they do have a couple anti-Zac mechanics in here, in that they have a debuff that they do on their all attack that reduces all brave gains to 0. And this is for 1 turn. So if you don't have any debuff immunity or you're not pushing off the debuffs via the Revan strategy of all frame debuffs, you can get screwed over by that potentially. Beatrix, Gladio, and Core should help meet this orb too. The other annoying part of this fight, at least this wave, is that after every action you take, and this includes calls, additional abilities, etc., they will warp after your turns. These attacks aren't particularly dangerous, although you do want to make sure their brave isn't high on their turn or else they're going to kill you. So counters are good for that. Freezing with Setzer, although they're gonna churn through debuffs if they're warping all the time. So if you want to avoid any real pain, you want to have a really stacked BT phase or some damage dealer probably, and use your summon to make them warp as little as possible. Yeah, the orb isn't that big of an issue here. If you have Auron, he'll handle it himself, although the fight might take a while. The next wave is the obnoxious Deuce, Steam, Kraken, whatever things they're called, and the orb is water and lightning +1, which is just a copy paste of the Garnet Intertwined Wills orb. They are launch immune. Other than that, they have a melee counter, but I'm not sure exactly what triggers it. I was trying to figure it out because I brought Auron from my second wave, from my fight into that second wave, and then they didn't counter, but maybe it's below 80%. There might be a thing where if you paralyze them, they don't counter you, but I'm not sure about that. I'm sure someone else will figure that out. But they're obviously wanting you to bring Garnet on the second team. And then the last wave is the 9 Lost Chapter boss, and they don't have the element nonsense from the actual Lufenia, but they do have the Twins orb, deal 850k, so they want you to bring Twins on this fight. It's versus 3 targets, so obviously you have Twins BT, this fight is free. You can range mount it to get past the 850k, they don't have the mid-air HP damage reduction anymore, or you can just bring a BT Plus and blow it up, so nothing really to shout out there either. Just make sure you do it within 30 turns, because again, it's tighter because very hard plus. My plans for this event, I want Auron. I think Auron is probably the best unit of the month, LD only. He's very strong and could definitely fill a lot of holes in people's rosters. I have a bunch of tickets, so I'm going to throw them all at Auron. 7 would be nice consolation as well. I'm not Indolent Large, shout out to him. I'm not using her in the party, but her call would come useful down the line on Jegrin's fight that requires a stack debuff. If I do get the Twins BT here, I'm not going to go back for the LD. I'm on the fence about blowing him. I'm not sure how much I'd actually use him. I actually went back and watched my JP videos, and the only times I actually used Auron were here on the boss rush, and then I used him on Transcendent 6 in the left side, and then Transcendent 6 in the middle. Other than that, I benched him largely. As always, I caution people. There's a thread up on Reddit right now of people saying some people talking about people they were hyped for and ended up not actually using. So make sure you actually know that you're going to use Auron if you go crazy on him. Don't let it be another case of, oh wow, I was hype, but then I ended up not needing them anyways. Because I definitely I exhibited that in my JP account, as I just demonstrated. However, I do plan to try and use him a bit more on my GL account. I'm not going to blue him out the gate, but I might eventually. As for the boss rush, I think I'm going to try and do a no synergy team just to challenge myself, but then I'm going to bring a bunch of greens anyway, so who cares. To counter the first wave, I want to bring Zach to deal with the damage mitigation. He's going to get dispelled and broken by the whales, unfortunately. I think I mentioned that. Did I mention that? I don't know. The whales have an instant break move and they can get rid of generics if I didn't say it already. Plus that debuff's going to be annoying, but I'm going to bring Aerith alongside him. I don't think I've ever run those two in a fight, so it'd be nice to run them together. And the third will probably be Ace, just to bring a lot of damage. BT button with him earlier and then go into the phase and kind of kill the whales before they get a lot of turns to warp and then blow them up in the off turns. Second wave, I want to try out that melee counter thing they have. I want to bring Garland, and if I can actually stun them and send them away, I could bring an enchanter like Cryle alongside him. Maybe I tap Core on his side as well, just to do enough damage in his burst phase to kill them really quickly. That sounds entertaining. And then my last party, I'm thinking of going full Brave Gain meme with Ishtola, Porum, and Quistis. We can send those guys away, we can blow them up relatively quickly, and I can put Ishtola with the Rain's Call and get a bunch of launches off and do a lot of damage that way as well. But per usual, it varies. Sometimes stuff doesn't work out, but some of these ideas for challenging myself sound fun in my head, and I encourage everyone to do the same. Keep in mind, Auron does rerun down the line alongside Kryle's FR weapon during Kane's BT cycle. So if you get him now, he'll be getting a free upgrade there. As for my advice, some things to consider if you're on the fence about Auron or not, or don't know what to choose. As usual, try to beat stuff without pulling. Leverage the call to arms in Discord to smooth out any gaps in your play to potentially save yourself some resources. But here's just some things you might want to consider if you're on the fence. If you're newer and don't have a counter unit, this is a great option, an Auron. I think if you're newer, you should probably grab Auron in general because he covers a lot of stuff, being the debuffs and the HP regen and the countering and the ignoring defense. If you're going, oh, I have all these other counter tanks in Galuf and Gladio, I don't think that's the best comparison either, because while they're both covered, Galuf needs to dodge, and Gladio is a bit battery reliant on his stuff, and his counter is temporary, and Galuf has the whole not dying thing. But if you aren't dodging with Galuf, if it's a guaranteed hit, for example, Galuf isn't going to be at his peak. Auron also has the debuffs and the HP damage up on his stuff, which is handy, whereas Galuf is only providing more brave damage up, but you can't kill him. And Auron is ignoring defense, so he's going to be hitting a lot harder too. If you're saying, oh, I have Zach, I don't need Auron, that doesn't work as well because they function completely differently. Zach is on turn damage and Auron's off turn damage. Additionally, you can actually use them together, especially if they will benefit if there's AoE attacks. Zach will get his stacks up, and Zach also benefits on his main skills from the melee resist down. That being said, like I pointed out earlier, I didn't use Auron that much in JP ultimately. I mean, he's really... Transcendent 6 is a good reason to have Auron. The middle stage is Cancer. It is possible to item debuffs via UV, and I'm not talking about the Crucible, I'm talking about the main node. Auron's just really, really good there. And if you're not interested in Caius, you're not... Rain's Mount, while possible on Transcendent 6, is a bit difficult. I think Auron is one of the paths of least resistance there, so I'd consider him for that alone. Hell, if I pulled him and only used him there, I think that's probably a worthy investment, because that stage really does suck. I've said a lot though, I rambled a little bit too much again. Thought this video would be shorter, but it's going on 15 minutes now, so let's cut it here again. Thank you everyone, be sure to like the video on your way out, subscribe. Let me know your plans in the comments. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. Check out all my other stuff, Ranting Hour. That last Ranting Hour really was a good one. You gotta see that that idiot of the century. But I'll catch you guys later. Peace.